Imagine you just picked up the newest 3D Mario game. You excitedly start the first level expecting more Mario platforming goodness. Instead, you get some of that, but in between the intrepid plumber jumping all over the place, you also play some mech-based Star Fox levels, a few Captain Toad treasure tracker puzzles, and just for kicks, how about a couple of Mario Kart races? Now, swap out Mario for Sonic, and you get this month's game. On this episode of Nintendo Kill Count, we track everything we kill in our playthrough of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle as we save the world from... Okay, look, I don't know what we are even fighting in this game, but we're going to save the world, alright? Anyways, let's get to it. The single-player campaign structure is pretty cool. It splits the game into two smaller campaigns covering the same story events, one from the perspective of the heroes, Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and the other from the perspective of the Dark Team comprising Shadow, Dr. Eggman, and Rouge. At the end of the game, both teams join forces for one final level before defeating the penultimate boss. Each team's corresponding character has a particular style of play. Sonic and Shadow's most resemble classic Sonic, where you are running around at the speed of sound, platforming and chaining enemy kills to preserve momentum. They also throw in some SSX grinding sections which are surprisingly fun. While I think you lose some of the speed and fluidity of classic 2D Sonic in the transition to 3D, when these levels are humming, they still feel great to play and are my personal favorite. Tails and Dr. Eggman pilot mechs, destroying any and everything in their path. These levels are slower paced and more methodical, but in my opinion are still fun and are by far the easiest. Then there are the treasure hunting levels of Knuckles and Rouge the Bat. Instead of traversing a level from point A to B, the area is much smaller and entirely open for exploration, and your goal is to find 3 shards of the Chaos Emerald. To assist you, you have a built-in radar that intensifies as you get closer to the treasure. These levels sucked. Your radar doesn't even begin to function until you're right on top of your target, and perhaps worst of all, the shards can be hidden in numerous locations. This is great for replayability, but if you're like me and had to look up how to get a certain shard, it is maddening. I cannot stress how much more I would have enjoyed the game if these treasure hunting levels had been scrapped, or at least if there had been fewer of them. Besides these main types of levels, there are also 2 incredibly basic kart racing chases. One is Tails and one is Rouge, but they function identically. These shouldn't be fun. I mean, I don't know if it's possible to have a more basic driving section in a game, and the environment they take place in is so boring. But for some reason, I really enjoyed them, and they were a surprising palate cleanser from the usual gameplay. Now, an interesting aspect of the driving levels is how many people you kill while on the road. You see, there are other cars out there with you, and if you crash into them, this happens. I don't know how you can consider this anything other than a fatality for the poor souls in the other vehicle. I briefly entertained the idea that this universe had self-driving cars, but then I remembered that their interpretation of the ultimate life form is a giant lizard, and I immediately discarded that notion. That then leads us to 2 important assumptions we must make. How many people are in the average car, and how many of them die in the ensuing accidents. Using nothing resembling science or research, I simply guessed that on average there were 2 people per car, and that they all died. In the grand scheme of things, this only adds 12 deaths to the kill count, so it doesn't really matter. But I think my assumptions are reasonable, and ridiculous things like this are, in my opinion, what makes the channel fun. For many, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is a game about Sonic, but for others, including my childhood self, it was a game about chows. If you're unfamiliar with chows, every mainline level has a collectible key that gains you access to their garden, as well as little animals and drugs that you can feed to these adorable creatures. After pumping them full of PEDs, you force them to compete in events and even fight. This may be blasphemous to some, but I did not do anything in the Chow Garden besides some minimal testing to see if feeding them animals would count towards the final kill tally, which it does not, as the animals appear unharmed afterwards. Boss battles are numerous and can be divided into two categories: those against members of the opposing team, like Eggman, Shadow, and Knuckles, and those against non-team members. Non-team member boss fights I don't have much to say about, however I did appreciate that some were more complicated than just jumping on the enemy's head 3 times, and they often incorporated platforming in neat ways. Contrast these with battles against other opposing team members, which are one of the funniest things I've experienced on this channel. Take, for example, when you play as Tails or Dr. Eggman and fight your contemporary on the opposite team. I don't know if the game designers intended the battles to play out like this, but I would bull rush the opponent, spamming my weapons as fast as possible, hoping that I came out on top as we traded fire. These battles were over so quick that the first time it happened, I was genuinely confused on whether I had won or lost. Games have conditioned me to think boss battles are these long, drawn-out affairs, and that they can be over in literal seconds was just goofy fun. Having covered the basic level structures, I guess now is as good a time as any to discuss the music, story, and cutscenes. In my opinion, the music is perhaps the aspect of the game that has aged the best. Some of these tracks absolutely slapped, and the opening song of the first level, City Escape, greatly contributes to what makes it so epic and iconic. Story-wise, I have no idea what is happening, but I kind of love it because of that. Playing Sonic Adventure 1 would have helped, but I'm not sure any amount of context could make the story resemble anything coherent. I think Dr. Eggman is trying to blow up the world with a Death Star, but I don't really understand why he decides to join up with Team Sonic at the end of the game. Besides this, Shadow has a crush on a human, which is mildly disturbing, and as previously mentioned, the ultimate life form in this universe is a giant lizard, so yeah. And it's not just that the story is confusing, but the cutscenes that try to explain it are so bad. I mean, watch these and tell me that I'm wrong.
Phew. So far, so good. Hey, that's...
That blue hedgehog again, of all places.
I found you, Faker.
Faker? I think you're the fake hedgehog around here. You're comparing yourself to me? Huh? You're not even good enough to be
I'll
my
make you eat those words. The reason I'm in here is because of that fake hedgehog.
You mean that black hedgehog?
Did you see it? Where is it now?
If I tell ya, will you marry me?
No way!
I thought I had you this time.
From a technical standpoint, these cutscenes are atrocious as they are poorly timed, causing some characters' dialogue to be cut off or come across super stilted. While they are unequivocally awful, this level of jank is one of my favorite things from my playthrough, and I feel the cutscenes are the equivalent of the Star Wars prequels, with just how many memes can be made from them. For the final kill count, I greatly simplified 2 aspects. The first was grouping enemies by type, so for example, I didn't separately track beetle enemies, as it was challenging to distinguish between bomb beetles, gun beetles, and mono beetles. The second thing I had to consider was, should I track kills on a per character basis, so Sonic has X amount of kills and Shadow has Y amount, or should I just combine them all together? I obviously chose what was easiest. So, in total, as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, Dr. Eggman, and Rouge, we killed 166 artificial chows, 7 blue eagles, 359 beetle enemies, 11 E1000s, 42 hawk enemies, 294 hunter enemies, 68 hornet enemies, 13 kiki, 2 rhino cannons, 10 rhino jets, 5 rhino spikes, 5 Unitas, 12 people in cars, 1 F6T Bigfoot, 1 King Boom Boo, 2 Egg Golems, 1 B3X Hot, 1 R1A Flying Multi-Wheel Attacker, and 1 prototype of the Ultimate Life Form. This brings the final kill tally to 1,001 enemies. Pushing beyond 1,000 kills puts this group of Sonic characters in rare company, as only 2 other characters, James Bond from GoldenEye 007 on N64, and Michael Ford from the Conduit on Wii have broken the 1000 kill mark. While I didn't separate the kills on a per character basis, I can confirm that Tails and Dr. Eggman did the bulk of the damage, which makes sense since they were piloting vehicles with very spammable weapons. For being over 20 years old, I still appreciated certain aspects of Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Among them was the generous checkpoint system. In many other games of the era, checkpoints and levels were scarce and could lead to a lot of frustration when you ran out of lives. Yes, this still happened to me, but I never felt I lost much progress. On the flip side though, I don't think the life system feels good anymore. It just seems like a horrible way to force you to restart an entire level, rather than continue from checkpoints. If I started a level with less than 3 lives, I considered just jumping off the edge so I could spawn with 5 fresh ones instead. When an aspect of the game is causing the player to consider throwing themselves off a cliff, you know it might not be a great idea anymore. While the game incorporates upgrades for each character, I wasn't super impressed with any of them, and kinda wish they gave you all the abilities from the start. The other major complaint I have is the camera and controls could be challenging to predict. Many times when I died falling off a ledge, I felt it was the game's fault, and not because of anything I did. Overall then, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is a decent game, but it doesn't do enough for me to want to come back. Except maybe to train the Ultimate Chow. That could bring me back. Thanks so much for watching, and consider subscribing as I'm trying to reach 15 subs by the year 2080. Why 2080? Because I believe in setting achievable goals. Bye!